Hi there and welcome to today's video on guilt versus shame. So guilt and shame are like cousin emotions in a sense, where they share some similarities, but they have some very big differences. With guilt can sometimes be a very positive emotion if it's not chronic, in that it gives the person the opportunity to make some type of reparation for the thing they feel that they did wrong or that they should have done more. Shame, on the other hand, dooms the person to sit in a very negative mood state and self-loathing at times and a deepened sense of low self-worth that isn't helpful for any parties involved. So shame can be identified as a person feeling that they themselves are defective or bad or unworthy, whereas guilt is separate from the person and it's more behavioral. So the person then identifies that they did something wrong, or they possibly didn't do enough of something. So the behavior separates the person from the thing that they think is bad, whereas shame is more located within the self. Now, shame can be extremely destructive as a whole perceptual force, because that person will walk around feeling so defective, unworthy, and bad that they may rage at other people if somehow they are triggered in some way, because shame, we know from research, is triggered in the presence of other people. It's a perceptual thing as well as with guilt, but shame can only happen with the presence of somebody with you and makes you feel really bad. Sometimes it's not the other person that makes you feel ashamed. It's something that you've learned from childhood or through your relationships where you're quite ashamed of something, and then someone says something to you and then that's it, you triggered. So shame is a more deepened construct that needs to be worked on daily with self-worth and self-narratives. Because remember that everything that we ingest, the news, books, music, media, influences the way we see ourselves and the world around us. Now, coming back to guilt. Guilt is something, if it's not chronic, it's something that can be worked on if we try and separate the behavior from the self. Now, one of the first things that we need to identify with guilt is, what is it that's making us feel guilty? So we actually have to name the feeling, name the guilt. So it could be that you did something wrong in a relationship, or you felt you weren't there enough for somebody, or somebody was really not okay with something and they felt alone, or perhaps something in your work-related things. It doesn't have to always be relational. But with guilt, the first step is to identify what it is that you're feeling guilty of. Can you make reparation for that guilt? Is there something that you can do to right the wrong? Oftentimes with very chronic cases, like say, after a grief episode where you've lost somebody and you don't know what you could have done to have helped the person more, a good way to make reparation is to volunteer at an organization or cause or something where you can right that wrong and make reparation. The next is to start learning from the action. After you've tried to make reparation, try and learn from it. Can you go and apologize to the person that you feel you've hurt really badly? Is there something that you could do to rectify the situation? So you're taking active steps to try and separate yourself from the guilty feeling to make reparation. Once you've apologized and you've reached out for support from your community, you then need to start absolving yourself from the episode, whatever it was that was really, really hurtful and it affected your self-esteem in some way. Is that we have to understand that we are human beings on a journey of discovery. And unless we're doing things maliciously, which also needs to be investigated, it's an opportunity for us to really separate ourselves and say, what could I do better in the future? What could I do to right this mistake or learn from the episode? Then we have to start a journey of forgiving oneself. Forgiving oneself for being human and fragile and learning about ourselves and others in the world around us. Because remember, we're operating from our level of consciousness. So as long as we're learning and we're challenging our level of consciousness and actively making reparation, then we cannot or should not hold on to guilt because we ourselves are not bad people. We just do bad things. So a lot of people sit with that narrative of I am bad if I do this thing or I don't do this thing. And that often comes from childhood or learned mechanisms through relationships. And so from that we can challenge ourselves and start to really look at how we can see ourselves as good despite our frailties and being human. I hope this video helps somewhat into a brief introduction into guilt and shame. With regard to shame, it's a much deeper construct, but it can be managed with time, is that it needs a deeper analytical lens to look at where the shame comes from. So shame can spiral as well, so it can get much, much bigger, in the sense that if someone triggers your shame, even unintentionally, then you could go into a whole tailspin of perhaps lashing out at a boss or a friend or co-worker because that shame is triggered, and then you go into a deeper shame spiral. So it's important to analyze where the shame comes from, perhaps the rage that comes with it, or any type of outburst, and start to analyze why you feel so bad about something that you think you are. Are you bad? Are you defective? Is that how you think you are? Because we have to start to heal the inner child that feels they are so bad, when in fact we are actually just human beings on a journey, and we have to forgive that in ourselves. So those of you that can identify that there is some type of shame cycle in you, I hope that you start to reach out to at least your family members or community to start testing your assumption about yourself and get the reassurance. Firstly, it's very helpful with community and support and all of those senses of belonging, but also, if need be, to speak to a professional, an objective type of person to help you start to challenge these constructs that you have about yourself. Thank you so much. Bye.